Lucas Miller, our new MBA toting director, saw me covered in grease and assumed I was a relic. He didn't know I was the only person certified to touch the high-pressure bio valves. When he fired me for laziness mid-repair, he didn't just ruin my career, he unknowingly armed a timed bomb in a $100 million pharmaceutical plant. I packed my tools, smiled, and waited for the inevitable boom. Before we get back to today's story, we have a critical update. Due to unforeseen technical issues, this channel has unfortunately been demonetized. Without this revenue, it is simply impossible for us to sustain the costs of producing these videos, meaning we will soon have to stop uploading on this channel entirely. But don't worry, the story continues. We are officially moving everything to our new channel, Job Site Karma. Please make sure to subscribe there right now so you don't miss any future episodes. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag. Thank you for your continued support during this transition. Now, back to the story. The sound of a failing reactor isn't a scream, it's a hum, a deep vibrating resonance that you feel in your molars before you hear it with your ears. At 2:15 p.m. on a Tuesday, that hum started deep within the bowels of Reactor 4. I was already moving before the digital alarms even registered the variance. I'm Joseph Smith, 55 years old, and for the last 20 years, I've been the lead system specialist at Halloway Pharma. To the uneducated eye, I look like a glorified janitor in blue coveralls. But in reality, I am the shepherd of a volatile chemical flock. "It's a Christian!" I shouted over the rising whine of the turbine pumps. "Grab the calibration kit. The delta V pressure is spiking on the intake valve." Christian, my 22-year-old apprentice, fumbled with his latch. He was a good kid, eager to learn, but he still panicked when the red lights started flashing, and right now, the control board looked like a Christmas tree catching fire. "Joseph, the heat sensors are reading 300 degrees, Christian yelled, his voice cracking. "Shouldn't we dump the batch?" "No," I said, sliding under the massive steel belly of the mixing tank. "If we dump now, we lose $2 million of product and clog the waistlines for a week. It's just a stuck solenoid. I need to bypass the hydraulic lock manually." I lay on my back, the cold concrete seeping through my coveralls. Above me, the intricate maze of pipes hissed and groaned. This plant was my life. I knew every bolt, every weld, and every temperamental sensor. Specifically, I held the ISO 9001 master certification for hazardous chemical lines. There were only 3 people in the state with that ticket, and the other 2 were retired. I reached up, my wrench locking onto the manual override bolt. It was hot, searingly hot. I gritted my teeth, ignoring the burn on my knuckles. Sweat stung my eyes. This was delicate surgery performed with a 20-pound wrench. "Joseph, we have company!" Christian hissed, kicking my boot. I didn't stop. "Not now, kid. I almost have it." "Mr. Smith!" A voice cut through the noise. It wasn't the frantic tone of an engineer. It was the polished, annoyed drawl of someone who had never sweated through a shift in their life. I gave the bolt one final, agonizing quarter turn. The humming instantly dropped an octave. The pressure released. The beast was tamed. I slid out from under the machine, wiping grease from my forehead with a rag that was already black. I stood up, my knees popping, to face our visitor. It was Lucas Miller, the new efficiency director. He had been here for 3 weeks, and in that time, he had managed to alienate every department head and cut the break room coffee budget by 40%. He stood there in a tailored gray suit that probably cost more than my truck, checking his watch with exaggerated impatience. "Is there a problem, Mr. Miller?" I asked, breathing hard. "The problem, Joseph," he said, looking at the grease on my hands with undisguised disgust, "is that every time I walk down here, you are lying on the floor. We are running a pharmaceutical manufacturing plant, not a roadside garage." I blinked. The adrenaline from saving the batch was still coursing through me. I was calibrating the intake valve. If I hadn't done that, the reactor would have scrammed. You would have lost the batch. Lucas laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "Always the drama with you maintenance guys. Saving the batch. Critical failure. It's all theater to justify your overtime. I've seen the logs, Joseph. You spend 3 hours a day on preventative checks. Do you know what I call that? Loitering." Christian stepped forward, looking terrified but brave. "Sir, Joseph is the only one who knows how to—" "Quiet!" Lucas snapped, not even looking at the kid. He kept his eyes pinned on me. I was brought in here to trim the fat. And Joseph, all looking at your salary and your output, you are looking very heavy. The alarms on the wall finally went silent, transitioning to a steady, safe green glow. I had saved the day. And this man was looking at me like I had just robbed the register. The silence in the plant following an alarm reset is usually heavy, filled with the collective exhale of the crew. But this silence was sharp. It felt like the air before a lightning strike. I wiped my hands again, slowly. I've dealt with corporate types before, bean counters who think a spreadsheet reflects reality. Usually you just nod, throw some technical jargon at them, and they retreat to their air-conditioned offices. "Mr. Miller," I said, keeping my voice level. "I understand you have metrics to hit, but this machinery is 20 years old. It requires daily hands-on tuning. The preventative checks you see on the log are me manually balancing the pH sensors so they don't corrode. If I stop, they fail. If they fail, the FDA pulls our license." Lucas smirked, shaking his head as if he were explaining algebra to a toddler. "See, that's that attitude. You think you're indispensable. You think because you've been here since the foundation was poured that you own the place. You don't. This is a system. Systems are automated. I've already ordered the new digital sensors. They arrive on Monday. Those digital sensors aren't compatible with the analog couplings on Reactor 4, I said, my voice dropping. I wrote a report on this last week. Did you read it?" Lucas's face flushed. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and insecurity. "Wait, I don't need to read reports from a mechanic to know how to run a business. I need employees who follow orders and work efficiently. You were lying on the floor during peak production hours." "I was fixing a bypass valve," I argued, my patience fraying. "You were napping," Lucas shouted, his voice echoing off the steel tanks. The accusation hung there. Christian gasped. Two other floor workers, Mike and Sam, stopped their forklifts and watched. "You're firing me?" I asked, the realization hitting me colder than the concrete floor. "I am terminating you for cause," Lucas declared, straightening his tie. "Gross misconduct, wasting company time, insubordination, and honestly, poor hygiene. You're a bad image for the modern direction of Halloway Pharma." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his inner jacket pocket. He had come down here prepared. He had written this up before he even saw me under the tank. This wasn't about the valve. This was a hit. "Hand over your badge and your keys," Lucas said, extending a manicured hand. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the arrogance, the complete lack of understanding of the forces he was playing with. And then, a strange calm washed over me. If I fought this, if I begged, I might keep my job for another month. But he would make my life hell. And eventually, something would break that I wouldn't be allowed to fix, and people could get hurt. But if I left now? "Okay," I said softly. Lucas blinked, surprised by the lack of a fight. "Okay? You're the boss," I said. I unclipped my ID badge from my coveralls. I took the master key ring, the one with the keys to the chemical storage lockers. There's the high-pressure override panels and the manual lockout padlocks, and dropped them into his hand. They were heavy. His hand dipped under the weight. "You know," I said, leaning in slightly, "the biostabilizer on line 3 needs to be flushed every 12 hours. If you don't, the residue hardens. It turns into cement." Lucas sneered, pocketing the keys. "We have a manual for that. We don't need folklore. Get your things. You have 10 minutes to clear the premises." I looked at Christian. The kid looked like he was about to cry. "Watch the gauges, kid," I whispered to him. "And when the needle hits red, run." My locker was in the break room, a metal box battered by years of use. It was covered in stickers from vendors, Loctite, 3M, Dow Chemical. Inside, I had photos of my daughter, Veda, borrowed from when she was 5 years old to her college graduation last year. I packed them into a cardboard box. I packed my personal torque wrench, my lucky multimeter, and my thermos. "Joseph?" I turned. It was Linda from HR. She was a kind woman, perpetually stressed, with gray roots showing in her hair. She looked pale. "I just got the email from Lucas," she whispered, looking over her shoulder to make sure she wasn't being watched. "Joseph, I'm so sorry. I tried to tell him you're a protected asset under the union contract, but he bypassed me. He went straight to the VP of operations. It's okay, Linda, I said, closing my locker gently. He wants to cut costs. I'm the biggest cost on the maintenance payroll. But who is going to sign the compliance logs? She asked, her eyes wide. The quarterly audit is next week, Thursday. If those logs aren't signed by a certified master technician, then the plant is operating illegally, I finished for her. But that's not my problem anymore, is it? Linda looked at the box in my hands. He marked you as do not rehire. He stripped your severance. That stung. 20 years. I had missed birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays to keep this plant running during blizzards and these power outages. And I was leaving with nothing but a box of junk and a blackened reputation. He can mark whatever he wants, I said, hefting the box. He's about to find out that you can't run a $100 million reactor with an MBA and a bad attitude. I walked out of the break room and onto the main floor. The hum of the factory was different now. To anyone else, it sounded normal, but to me, I could hear the subtle dissonance. Old Line 2 was vibrating slightly too hard. The cooling fans on the roof were cycling too fast. The machine was already missing me. I walked past the control booth. Christian was standing there, staring at the screens. He looked at me through the glass, his hand raised in a hesitant wave. I nodded back. Lucas Miller was standing by the security turnstiles, arms crossed, watching to make sure I didn't steal a stapler. "Don't worry about the uniform," Lucas called out as I approached. "We'll burn it." I stopped right in front of him. I was 6'2", broad-shouldered from decades of wrench turning. He was 5'9" in lifts. "Lucas," I said, my voice low enough that only he could hear. "The intake valve I just fixed, it's a temporary patch. It needs a new seal. I ordered the part. It's in the warehouse. Don't rely on the patch for more than 24 hours. Lucas laughed, shaking his head. "Pathetic. Even on your way out, you're trying to sound important. Goodbye, Joseph." I pushed through the turnstile. The cool afternoon air hit my face. I walked to my truck, an old Ford F-150 that had seen better days. I placed my box on the passenger seat. I sat behind the wheel for a moment, looking at the massive steel structure of the plant against the blue sky. It was a beast. And I had just handed the leash to a child. I pulled my phone out. I didn't call my wife. She passed 3 years ago. I didn't call Veda yet. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. "Law offices of Vane and Associates," a crisp voice answered. "I need to speak to Theo," I said. "Mr. Vane is in court. May I ask who is calling?" "Tell him it's Joseph Smith. Tell him the Hawk owes me a favor. And tell him I just found a very large, very expensive accident waiting to happen. My house was too quiet. For 20 years, my rhythm had been dictated by the shift clock. Up at 4:30 a.m., coffee, drive, work, home by 6 p.m. Now, at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday, I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a patch of sunlight moving across the floor. I felt like a ghost in my own life. My phone had been buzzing non-stop since I left the parking lot yesterday. Most of the calls were from numbers I recognized, guys from the floor, shift supervisors, even the cafeteria lady. I let them all go to voicemail. What was there to say? "Yeah, he fired me because he thinks grease makes you stupid." Then Veda called. "Dad?" Her voice was sharp, worried. "Christian just texted me. He said security escorted you out. What is going on?" Veda was 28, sharp as a tack, and worked as a data analyst for a logistics firm downtown. She had my stubbornness and her mother's brains. "I got fired, V," I said, taking a sip of lukewarm coffee. "Lucas Miller decided I was redundant." "Redundant?" she practically shouted. "Dad, you are the plant. You wrote the safety protocols. Did you sign the termination papers?" "No, I just handed him my keys and left." "Good, don't sign anything. I'm coming over." "Veda, you have work." "I'm taking a sick day. I'm bringing bagels. Do not answer the phone for anyone from Holloway until I get there." She hung up before I could argue. I looked at the phone again. A new voicemail notification popped up. It was from the plant, but it wasn't a friend. It was Lucas. I pressed play, putting it on speaker. "Joseph, this is Mr. Miller. It seems you didn't leave the password for the digital administrative account for the maintenance server. This is company property. I need you to email that to me immediately. If you don't, we will consider it theft of intellectual property and pursue legal action." I chuckled. The digital administrative account was just a spreadsheet I built on my lunch breaks to track part wear and tear because the corporate software was trash. It wasn't company property, it was my personal notebook. I didn't reply. Silence, I was learning, was free for me, but very expensive for them. 10 minutes later, Veda burst through the door with a bag of bagels and a laptop under her arm. She didn't hug me. She set up a command center on my dining table. "Okay," she said, me typing furiously. "I'm looking at your contract. They owe you 6 months severance for a termination without cause unless they can prove gross negligence. Did you break anything?" "No," I said, buttering a bagel. "I fixed a valve that was about to blow up the reactor." "Okay, so we have wrongful termination," Veda muttered. "But Dad," Christian texted me again. "He says the digital sensors Lucas ordered arrived this morning." I froze. "Already?" "Yeah, he overnighted them. He wants them installed by noon." I closed my eyes. The digital sensors run on a 5-volt loop. The analog couplings on the reactor are 24 volt. If he plugs those in, what happens? The sensors will fry instantly. The computer will read 0 pressure because the signal is dead. Oh, but the pressure will actually be rising. Does Christian know this? Christian knows, but Christian has a mortgage and a baby on the way. If Lucas tells him to plug it in, he'll plug it in. Veda looked at me, her eyes dark. "Dad, if that happens, people get hurt." "I know," I said, standing up. "That's why I called Theo." As if summoned, a sleek black sedan pulled into my driveway. It looked like a shark on wheels. The door opened, and Theo Vane stepped out. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my house, and he still looked like he could win a bar fight. "Joseph!" Theo boomed, walking up the porch steps. "You look terrible. Retirement doesn't suit you." "Theo," I shook his hand. He had a grip like a vice. "Thanks for coming." For the man who pulled me out of a burning inspection pit in '98, I'd come from the moon, Theo said, stepping into the kitchen. He nodded at Veda. "Veda, still prettier than your father." "Theo," she smiled thinly, "we have a situation." "I heard," Theo said, sitting down and pulling a thick legal pad from his briefcase. "I made some calls. Lucas Miller, MBA from Wharton, track record of slashing costs, boosting stock short-term, and then bailing before the infrastructure collapses. He's a stripper, Joseph. He strips assets." "He fired me for cause," I said. "Gross misconduct." Theo grinned. It was a predatory grin. "Perfect. That means we don't just sue for severance. We sue for defamation. But first, tell me about this accident you mentioned." "He's replacing analog safety controls with incompatible digital ones," I explained. "Today." Theo stopped writing. He looked at me, dead serious. "Or is there a paper trail?" "I wrote a report last week explaining why it wouldn't work. He ignored it." "Do you have a copy?" "It's on the maintenance server," I said, "which I'm locked out of." Veda spun her laptop around. "Actually, Dad, you emailed a copy to your personal Gmail account last Tuesday. Subject, safety concerns, ARA, upgrade. Remember? You wanted me to proofread it." Theo's smile got wider. "Beautiful. That email is your golden ticket. It proves he was warned. It proves negligence. Now, here is what we do." He leaned in. "We do nothing." "Nothing?" I asked. "If we warn him now, he covers his tracks," Theo said. "We wait. We let him install the sensors. We let the system fail. Safely, I hope." "The secondary relief valves are mechanical," I said. "They'll pop if the pressure gets too high. It'll make a hell of a mess, ruin the product, and shut the plant down for weeks. But it shouldn't kill anyone." "Good," Theo said. "Let him break his toy. Then, when the stock plummets and the board is screaming for answers, we walk in." The waiting was the hardest part. Wednesday afternoon dragged on. Theo stayed for lunch, telling stories about corporate takedowns he'd orchestrated. He was currently investigating a bridge collapse in Ohio. "It's always the same, Joseph," he said, stabbing a pickle with a fork. "Arrogance. They think physics negotiates. They think because they save 10% on concrete, gravity will look the other way. It never does." At 2 p.m., my phone rang again. It was Christian. "Answer it," Theo commanded. "Put it on speaker." I swiped the screen. "Christian?" "Joseph." "Oh, God," Christian was whispering. I could hear the hum of the plant in the background. It sounded uneven, a wobbly, oscillating rhythm. He made us do it. We installed the digital sensors. And, I asked, my stomach tightening. They blew immediately, just like you said. Smoke, sparks, the works. But Lucas, he wouldn't let us shut down. What? I stood up. He said the sensors were faulty. He said to bypass the safety cutoff and run the reactor on manual estimation. He said we can't miss the quota for the shipment tonight. I looked at Theo. His face had gone pale. Christian, I said, my voice steady. Listen to me very carefully. Running that reactor without pressure sensors is like driving a car blindfolded at 100 miles an hour. You need to get out of there. I can't, Christian cried. He's standing right here. He says if anyone leaves their post, they're fired. Joseph, the pipes are shaking. I can hear them banging. Get out, I shouted. Pull the fire alarm if you have to. Just get everyone off the floor. The line went dead. He hung up, I said, staring at the phone. He's bypassing safety cutoffs, Theo said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. That's not negligence anymore. That's criminal recklessness. We have to go, I said, grabbing my keys. If that thing blows, the relief valves might not handle the surge if the mix is unstable. I'm driving, Theo said. As we ran to his car, I looked at the sky in the direction of the plant, 10 miles away. It was a clear blue day. Please, I prayed, let the mechanical valves hold. The drive to the plant usually took 20 minutes. Theo made it in 11. He drove like a maniac, weaving through traffic, while I monitored the local emergency scanner app on Veda's phone in the back seat. Nothing on the scanner yet, Veda said, her voice trembling. That's good, right? It means it hasn't popped yet, I said. When we pulled up to the main gate, the security guard, a guy named Ralph I'd known for years, stepped out to block us. Joseph, you can't come in, Ralph said, looking apologetic. Mr. Miller gave strict orders. If you set foot on the property, I have to call the cops. Ralph, I said, leaning out the window, is the plant shaking? Ralph looked back at the main building. Yeah, it feels like a train is going by underneath us. Started 10 minutes ago. Open the gate, Ralph, Theo barked from the driver's seat. I am Theodore Vane, legal counsel for Mr. Smith. And if you don't open that gate and that plant explodes, you will be named as an accessory to manslaughter in the lawsuit I file tomorrow. Ralph looked at Theo's suit, then at the trembling ground, then at me. Go, he said, hitting the button. We tore up the driveway. The closer we got, the louder it was. It wasn't a hum anymore. It was a roar, the sound of high-pressure steam forcing its way through joints that weren't designed for it. We slammed to a halt in front of the admin building. I jumped out. The smell hit me instantly. Acrid, chemical, sweet. Leak, I yelled. The gaskets are blowing. I ran for the side door, the one that led directly to the maintenance bay. Theo and Veda were right behind me. I burst onto the factory floor. It was chaos. Steam was hissing from 3 different flanges. The floor was slick with condensation. The noise was deafening. In the center of it all, by the main control panel, stood Lucas Miller. He was screaming at Christian, who was frantically typing on a keyboard that wasn't responding. Override it, Lucas was yelling. Force the valve shut. I can't, Christian screamed back. The system is locked out. I didn't think. I ran. Get away from the panel, I roared. Lucas turned, his face red with rage. Security, get him out of... Boom. A pipe overhead burst. A jet of white steam slammed into the concrete floor just 3 feet from Lucas, knocking him off his feet. The shockwave rattled my teeth. The relief valves are jammed, Christian yelled, pointing to the manual gauges. The needles were buried in the red. Pressure is at 150 psi and climbing. All burst pressure is 180. I looked at the setup. The digital sensors Lucas had installed had shorted the logic board. The computer wouldn't open the vents because it thought the pressure was 0, and the mechanical backups were clogged because the mix had cooled and hardened, just like I told him it would. We have to dump it manually, I shouted, grabbing a pry bar from the wall. You can't, Lucas scrambled up, his suit wet and ruined. That's $1 million of product. I ignored him. I looked at Theo. Get him out of here. Theo didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lucas by the collar of his expensive jacket and dragged him toward the exit like a sack of potatoes. Move, you idiot, or you die. Christian, Veda, go, I ordered. I'm staying, Christian said, grabbing another bar. Nice, I can help with the wheel. I didn't have time to argue. Line 4, the emergency dump valve. It's rusted shut. We need to force it. We ran to the back of the tank. The heat was intense. The metal was groaning, a high-pitched screech of steel being stretched beyond its limit. "On three!" I yelled, jamming the pry bar into the wheel spokes. Christian did the same on the other side. 1, 2, 3, heave! We pulled. My muscles screamed. The vein in my forehead felt like it was going to burst. The wheel didn't budge. "Again!" I roared. "Heave!" Crack. The rust gave way. The wheel spun. A massive whoosh shook the building as the emergency vents opened. A geyser of chemical sludge shot out into the containment pit outside. The pressure gauge on the tank dropped. 150, 120, 80. The roar faded to a hiss. The shaking stopped. I slumped against the tank, gasping for air. My hands were shaking. Christian slid down the wall, his face gray. "We did it." I looked up. Standing in the doorway, soaked and trembling, was Lucas Miller, and behind him, holding a phone that was recording everything, was Theo Vane. "Joseph!" Lucas stammered, his arrogance completely washed away by the steam. You saved it." I stood up slowly. I walked over to him, wiped a glob of chemical sludge from my shoulder, and flicked it onto his shoe. "I didn't do it for you," I said. "Now, get off my floor." The silence that followed the near explosion was deceptive. The plant wasn't exploding, but it was dead. The emergency dump had saved the building. But the chemical slurry, a mixture that turns to concrete if not kept at a precise temperature, was now cooling rapidly inside the intricate web of pipes that hadn't been flushed. "It's hardening," I said, my voice echoing in the cavernous room. I looked at the pressure gauges, now reading 0. The reactor is safe, but the lines, they're done. The whole system is clogging up as we speak. Lucas Miller stared at the machinery, his eyes wide and unblinking. He looked like a child who had just realized he'd broken a priceless vase. Can we flush it? Turn the pumps back on? With what?" I asked, wiping my hands on a rag. "The logic board is fried, the sensors are dead, and even if we could start the pumps, the mix is already too thick. You'd burn out the motors in 10 seconds. So," Lucas swallowed hard. So production is stopped?" "Stopped?" I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Lucas, you don't understand. This isn't a pause. You've bricked the plant. Those pipes are filled with 3 tons of hardening polymer. You have to replace everything. The valves, the manifolds, the heat exchangers. You're looking at a 6-month shutdown. Minimum." The color drained from his face completely. 6 months? The quarterly earnings? The buyout? He trailed off, realizing he'd said too much. Theo Vane stepped forward, his phone still recording. "Buyout? Did you say buyout?" Lucas flinched. "No, I said payout. The insurance payout." "You said buyout," Theo corrected, his voice sharp as a razor. "And judging by your reaction to a 6-month shutdown, I'm guessing your bonus was tied to a short-term stock performance that just evaporated." Lucas straightened his tie, trying to regain some shred of authority. "This is an internal matter. You are trespassing. Get out." "I was invited," Theo smiled, pointing to the security cameras. "By necessity, to save lives, which, legally speaking, makes me a good Samaritan. And you?" He pointed the phone at the ruined sensors on the floor. "You are looking at criminal negligence." "I want everyone out," Lucas screamed, his voice cracking. "Security!" 2 guards trotted in, looking confused and scared. "Escort them out!" Lucas pointed a shaking finger at me. "We're going," I said. I looked at Christian. "You coming, kid?" Christian looked at Lucas, then at the ruined plant, then at me. He unclipped his badge and dropped it on the floor. It made a small clink sound. "Yeah," Christian said. "I'm coming." The news hit the market before we even got back to my house. Halloway Pharma stock plummets 18% after catastrophic plant failure, Veda read from her phone as we sat in my living room. Rumors of environmental containment breach. "There wasn't a breach," I muttered. "The containment pit caught it all. That's what it's designed for." "The market doesn't know that," Theo said, pacing the room. "All they know is the flagship plant is offline. Lucas Miller just cost the company about $200 million in market cap in an hour." "So he's fired?" Veda asked. "Oh, he's worse than fired," Theo grinned. "He's radioactive. But right now, the C-suite, the CEO, the board, they are in full panic mode. They need a scapegoat. Yes, and guess who that's going to be? Me, I said. Exactly. They'll say the former maintenance lead sabotaged the plant before leaving. They'll try to pin the sensor failure on you. But I have the emails, I said. Yes, and we're going to use them, but not yet. Theo stopped pacing. Joseph, do you know CEO Holloway personally? I met him once, I said. 10 years ago. He gave me a plaque for 10 years of service. Seemed like a decent guy, just distant. Obsessed with the numbers. Good, because he's going to call you. Why would he call me? Because you're the only one who knows how to fix it, Theo said. They can't wait 6 months. They need a miracle, and you're the only wizard in town. As if on cue, my phone rang. It wasn't Holloway. It was Linda from HR. Joseph? She was crying. It's a nightmare here. All federal regulators are at the gate. The EPA is here. Lucas is locked in his office shredding documents. Linda, calm down, I said. You didn't do anything wrong. They're asking for the maintenance logs, she sobbed. The digital ones. Lucas said you stole them. He told the EPA investigators that you deleted the safety protocols before you were terminated. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. He was doubling down. Put me on speaker, Linda, Theo said, leaning over the phone. This is Theodore Vane, attorney at law. Linda, are you safe to talk? I think so. I'm in my car. Good, listen to me. Do not destroy anything. Do not sign anything. Go home. If anyone asks, tell them you are feeling unwell due to the chemical fumes. Can you do that? Yes, she whispered. Good, go. I hung up. Oh, he's trying to frame me. Let him try, Theo said. It makes the settlement check bigger. It took 2 days for the reality to set in for Holloway Pharma. The stock dropped another 10% on Thursday. The EPA shut the site down, pending a full investigation. The union filed a grievance on behalf of Christian and the other workers who were endangered. And Lucas Miller, he went silent. Friday morning, a black limousine pulled up to my curb. It wasn't Theo's. This one had diplomat flags on the fenders. A driver got out and opened the back door. An older man stepped out. He looked tired. He was wearing a suit that looked lived in, his tie loosened. It was CEO Holloway. I was sitting on the porch, drinking coffee. I didn't stand up. Joseph, Holloway said, walking up the path. He looked at the peeling paint on my railing. Nah, it's been a long time. Mr. Holloway, I nodded. Can we talk? My lawyer is inside, I said. Anything you say to me, you say to him. Holloway sighed. Fair enough. We went inside. Theo was already sitting at the table, a fresh legal pad ready. Veda was typing on her laptop. Mr. Vane, Holloway nodded to Theo. He looked at me. Joseph, I'm going to be direct. We are bleeding. The plant is dead. The engineers we flew in from Germany say it's a total teardown. They say 6 months. Sounds about right, I said. They also said that if someone knew the specific schematics of the secondary bypass loops, the ones installed in the 90s that aren't on the digital blueprints, we might be able to get line 1 and 2 running in a week, while we rebuild the rest. I stayed silent. I knew those loops. I installed them myself in '98 during the expansion. Lucas Miller tells me you sabotaged the sensors, Holloway said, watching my face. Lucas Miller is a liar, I said simply. Theo slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of the email I sent Veda. Subject: Urgent safety warning, sensor incompatibility. Dated 1 week before the accident. Holloway picked it up. He read it. His face grew darker with every line. He received this? Holloway asked quietly. He received a physical copy on his desk and a digital copy to his inbox, Theo said. We also have witness testimony from your HR director that he bypassed union safety protocols to fire Mr. Smith, and testimony from the floor apprentice that he ordered the safety overrides manually. Holloway closed his eyes. He let out a long breath. As he told me the sensors were an upgrade, he said he was modernizing. He was stripping the asset, Theo said. We found his emails too. He was in talks with your competitor, Mild Pharma, to leak the efficiency data. He wanted to tank the stock so they could buy you out cheap. His bonus was a kickback from them. Holloway looked up, shock replacing the fatigue. Corporate espionage? Treason, Theo corrected. Holloway crumpled the paper in his hand. He's done. I'll have security throw him out today. He looked at me. Joseph, I need you back. I'll reinstate you. Full back pay, a raise, 20%. Just, please, help us get the lines running. I looked at the CEO, the man who signed the checks but didn't know his own factory floor. I looked at Theo. Theo smiled and leaned back. Mr. Holloway, I said slowly, but I don't want my job back. 30%, Holloway offered, and a bonus. No, I said, you don't understand. I don't want to be an employee anymore. Employees get fired because a manager doesn't like their shoes. Employees get ignored when they warn about safety. Then what do you want? I want to be a consultant, I said, and my rate is different. Holloway blinked, looking at me as if I had started speaking a foreign language. A consultant? Joseph, you need benefits. You need a pension. Why would you want to be a contractor? Because employees can be fired, I said, leaning forward, resting my elbows on the table. Contractors have termination clauses. Contractors have autonomy. And most importantly, the contractors don't answer to efficiency directors who have never held a wrench. Theo opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document, bound in blue cardstock. He slid it across the table to Holloway. This is the proposal for Smith Industrial Systems, Theo said smoothly. A limited liability corporation formed. Well, about 20 minutes ago. Joseph is the principal. I am the silent partner. Holloway put on his reading glasses. He flipped through the pages. This rate, Joseph, this is $300 an hour. That's triple your old salary. It includes overhead, I said calmly, and it includes the stupid tax. The what? The tax for fixing the mess your management created, I said. Plus, the contract stipulates that I have absolute authority over all maintenance protocols. No one overrides my safety calls. Not the plant manager, not the VP, not even you. If I say a line stops, it stops. Holloway looked at the numbers, then he looked at his phone. The stock ticker was probably bleeding another $1 million while he hesitated. And if we agree to this, Holloway asked, can you get lane 2 running? I can bypass the clogged manifold using the auxiliary steam trace, I said. It's a trick I learned in the '98 blizzard. I can have product moving in 48 hours. But I need Christian back, and I need him promoted to senior lead. I can't be there 24/7. Holloway took a pen from his pocket. He hovered over the signature line. One more thing, Theo added, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The indemnity clause on page 4. It states that Holloway Pharma accepts full legal liability for the incident on Tuesday, citing executive mismanagement as the cause. Joseph is absolved of all negligence. Holloway paused. Signing that was admitting fault. It opened the company up to lawsuits. If you don't sign it, Theo said, we go to the press with the emails, and the EPA, and the insurance adjusters. The fine for an unreported chemical negligence event starts at $50,000 a day per violation. You have 12 violations. Holloway looked at me. He saw 20 years of loyalty that had been spit on. He saw the only man who could save his company. He signed. Welcome back, Mr. Smith, Holloway said, handing the document to Theo. Or, should I say, Mr. Consultant. One last condition, I said, standing up. I want Lucas Miller in the boardroom when I walk back in. I want to look him in the eye when I tell him who runs the floor. Holloway pocketed his pen. His face was hard. Oh, don't worry, he'll be there. The boardroom at Holloway Pharma was a glass-walled aquarium overlooking the production floor. From up here, the workers looked like ants. The silence of the plant was eerie. The usual thrum of industry was gone, replaced by the stillness of a graveyard. I sat at the head of the table. Theo sat to my right. The door opened, and Lucas Miller walked in. He looked disheveled. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. He clearly hadn't slept. When he saw me sitting in the chairman's seat, he stopped dead. What is he doing here? Lucas snapped, turning to Holloway, who was standing by the window. I told you. The security was supposed to bar him from the premises. Sit down, Lucas, Holloway said. His voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of a falling anvil. Lucas sat, nervously adjusting his cuffs. Look, if this is about the sensor failure, I've already prepared a report. It was clearly legacy hardware incompatibility. Smith failed to maintain the... Stop, Holloway said. He didn't turn around. We know about the short positions, Lucas. The room went so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. Lucas froze. I don't know what you're talking about. Theo slid a folder across the polished mahogany table. It hit Lucas's hands with a heavy slap. That is a subpoena for your bank records, Theo said cheerfully. But we didn't even need them. Your emails to Apex Capital were on the company's server. You were advising them to short Holloway stock 2 days before you ordered the sensor swap. You weren't trying to improve efficiency. You were trying to cause a disruption. Lucas looked at the folder. He didn't open it. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with pure hate. You were just a grease monkey. You were supposed to just leave. And you were supposed to be smart, I said. But you forgot one thing. The plant isn't just machines, it's people. And when you treat people like parts, they tend to break when you need them most. You're fired, Lucas, Holloway said, finally turning around. For cause, for corporate espionage, and for gross negligence. You can't do that. Lucas stood up, his voice rising to a screech. I have a contract. I'll sue you for everything. Actually, Theo interjected, Owen, we've already handed the evidence to the SEC and the district attorney. The police are waiting in the lobby. I believe the charge is reckless endangerment and insider trading. You won't be suing anyone. You'll be looking for a bail bondsman. Lucas looked at the door. He looked at the window. For a second, I thought he might run. Then, the doors opened. 2 officers stepped in. Lucas Miller, one asked. Lucas slumped. The arrogance evaporated, leaving just a scared little man in a suit that was too expensive for prison. As they handcuffed him, he looked at me one last time. Who's going to fix it, huh? You? You're just one old man? I stood up. I picked up my hard hat from the table, the new one with consultant stenciled on the side. I'm not just one man, I said. I'm the guy with the keys. I walked past him, and out the door, and down the stairs to the floor. Christian was waiting for me by the main intake valve. He handed me a wrench. Ready, boss? Christian asked. Ready, I said. Let's wake this beast up. 6 months later, the plant was humming again. A steady rhythmic thrum that vibrated through the soles of my boots. It was the sound of a healthy machine. I stood on the catwalk overlooking Reactor 4. The new piping, stainless steel, top of the line, gleamed under the LED lights. Pressure holding steady at 120 pounds per square inch. Christian's voice crackled over the radio. He was in the control booth now, the senior systems lead. He wore a tie, but he still kept a wrench in his back pocket. Good lad. Copy that, I said. Log it and sign it. I wasn't wearing coveralls anymore. I was wearing a polo shirt with Smith Industrial Systems embroidered on the chest. I didn't turn wrenches much these days. I inspected, I advised, and I billed. Holloway Pharma had renewed my contract for another 2 years, but they weren't my only client anymore. Word travels fast in this industry. When you're the guy who saved a $100 million plant from a meltdown, other factories get curious. I had 3 other clients now. I had hired 2 more retired mechanics, guys like me pushed out for being too old to handle the workload. My income had tripled, yes, but more importantly, my time was my own. I walked out to the loading dock. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. My new truck, a pristine Silverado, sat there. I thought about Lucas. He was currently awaiting trial. His assets were frozen. And he had tried to play a game with people's lives to make a quick buck, and he lost everything. And me? I learned that my value wasn't in my ability to follow orders. It was in my ability to say no. I'm sitting here on my back deck now. The grill is going, Veda is inside making a salad, and the sun is going down. It's peaceful. But before I go, I want to talk to you directly. Because what happened to me happens every day. We are taught to be loyal. We are taught that if we keep our heads down and work hard, the company will take care of us. I'm here to tell you, that is a lie. The company protects the company. The moment you become a line item on a spreadsheet that's too high, you are vulnerable. Here are the mistakes I made. I kept my knowledge in my head, not on paper. I let them think my work was magic, not skill. And I assumed my years of service were a shield. They weren't. Here is what you need to do. Document everything. If you warn your boss about a safety issue, do it in an email. BCC your personal address. That email saved my reputation and my career. Without it, I would have been the scapegoat. Own your skills. Don't just be the person who fixes things. Be the person who holds the certification. Make yourself legally indispensable, not just functionally useful. Know your walking price. Everyone has a line. When Lucas crossed mine, I didn't beg, I walked away. The power to walk away is the only real power you have in a negotiation. They called me lazy, they called me old. Now, they call me sir. And the invoice is due on the 1st.